Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have a complete Game Week 2 guide where I'll answer all of your key questions and dilemmas ahead of the Game Week 2 deadline. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, something I pride myself on with my content is I will try wherever possible not to just directly tell you to do something or not to do something. What I try to do instead is explain the way that my brain works and my decision-making framework in the hope that that can help you. You can either say, actually, I really don't like the way you've made your decision there, or you could say, do you know what, I like the way you've approached that, I'm going to try and do so in the same way. And so I actually think it's quite useful with a lot of the questions that I'm getting at the moment is just to show you how my brain is working with these, because I think as the season progresses, it becomes easier and easier because we get more and more data and more information to work out when to make transfers, especially around blanks and doubles. Often they're actually dictated for us, transfers. But at the start of the season, when we have very limited data and very limited information, it is very difficult to try and work out if you should transfer X player to Y. Because yes, you could say just don't do it, just be patient, but then you don't want to miss out on potential gains. But at the same time, you don't want to knee-jerk in relation to not much evidence. So here is the way that my brain's kind of working right now when people are saying, should I do X to Y? And after this, I will then go through a set of transfers of should you transfer this player to that player and give my opinion specifically. So hopefully this is helpful. I know it's a little bit different in terms of FPL content. So why might you want to transfer a player out in Game Week 2, right? I can think of three reasons. There are probably more reasons, but the three reasons I can think of, unless it was a planned transfer and you just wanted to attack Game Week 1, is firstly that the minutes were lower than expected for the player that you want to take out. So you picked a player and you're like, actually, they got really poor minutes. Let's use someone like Marmoush as an example. You picked Marmoush, you expected him to be pretty nailed, get 80 to 90 minutes, and he didn't even start the game. So that's reason one. Reason two is that the player or the team that they play for, they were just really bad in Game Week 1. We'll use Aston Villa or West Ham as two teams that they just weren't very good. And the players that we selected, like Bowen, like Watkins, we really expected more from. The third option is maybe less so about the player that you own and actually just you really like an alternative. I'll use someone like Reijnders as an example. Maybe you don't have an issue with the player that you've got, but you just look at that and think, I would much rather that player instead. So there again might be other reasons beyond it, but I think those are the main three reasons that you might look to make a transfer. So all I've gone through is just, these are the questions that I'd be asking myself if these were the reasons that I was looking at a transfer. So let's start with the minutes of the player that you want to take out were lower than expected. The first question I would ask yourself is, did you predict them to have really good minutes pre-Game Week 1? So obviously you expected their minutes to be decent enough, but did you expect them to go ahead and get 90 minutes? If you didn't, and you knew that they were rotation risk, I don't see anything that's changed, right? If you didn't ever expect them to get perfect minutes, even maybe someone like a Marmoush as an example, you knew there was a chance he'd be benched. He plays for Pep. So if the minutes weren't that different to what you previously expected prior to Game Week 1, I probably wouldn't sell them now because, again, what did you expect? On the flip side, if you kind of expected them to get good minutes and they didn't, then that's a different story because whatever your hypothesis was around their minutes, that has obviously been proven to be false, at least in the first game week. So the next question I'd ask yourself, if you expected their minutes to be good, is was there context, justification, or reasoning for them having lower minutes? I'll use someone like, this isn't a great example, but just off the top of my head, Strand Larsen came off early for Wolves. The context behind Strand Larsen coming off early was that Wolves were getting absolutely battered and they might as well save him for a fixture like Bournemouth where they can actually go and win that game. So if a player came off early because of that or because of a tactical switch which was to do with the game state, for example, or let's say a player was benched but you feel like you can explain that as, again, a tactical setup that specifically suited that game, then again, I think if you can justify it and it makes sense and you think that might change for Game Week 2, then again, I probably wouldn't make the move. The only time I would make the move then is if you predicted that their minutes would be good in Game Week 1 and you thought they would be good for every week and that was proven to not be true and there was no real reason for that and you think that there could therefore be a worry on their minutes moving forward. That is the only time that minutes would affect whether I would make a transfer or not. Again, that doesn't mean that I would definitely make the transfer. That just means that I would start considering it at that stage. So the next question is, or the next reason that you might want to look at a transfer is, again, if they were just really bad in Game Week 1. There are tons of players that I can think of off the top of my head that people are asking about, right? Nicholas Fulkrug, Iliman Ndiaye. So the first question, and this is the most difficult, is do you actually think that Game Week 1 was representative of what we might see moving forward? So if you actually look at Game Week 1 last year, Man United beat Fulham 1-0 and Xerxes scored off the bench. Everyone was like, Xerxes is going to be a monster. I'm going to bring Xerxes in. Xerxes was, I think, the most transferred in, or the second most transferred in player ahead of Game Week 2. That wasn't representative. A lot of people could have spotted that. You look at someone like, I think Leicester drew with Spurs on the opening day, and I think Jamie Vardy scored. Lots of people are going, Jamie Vardy's back in the Prem. It's very difficult to know if Game Week 1 was the anomaly or if Game Week 1 was representative. That's why we want to collect more data. So if you don't think Game Week 1 was representative, and an example I'll use is Aston Villa. Aston Villa are a brilliant team. Watkins and Rodgers are great assets. That just wasn't representative. So if you don't think that is what we'll see moving forward, then of course, don't look to sell that player. If the answer is yes, you actually think, do you know what? I made a mistake. I picked Iliman Ndiaye. I think Everton will be really bad. I think Ndiaye's not a great player. And that's your genuine opinion now. The next question I'd ask yourself is, are the fixtures good? Because if the fixtures are good, then no, again, I wouldn't move. Because even if they're not a great asset and you think you've made a massive mistake, if the fixtures are there, they could still do pretty well. So I would keep them if the fixtures are fine. But if the fixtures are also not particularly good, you feel like you've made a mistake, they've not played well in Game Week 1, then again, at that stage, I would consider the move. Hopefully you're following the train of thought and hopefully this is actually useful. This is what my brain does on a deadline stream when someone's asking me, should I buy a player, sell a player, but I'm just doing a much quicker version. The final option, and this is the more difficult one, is if you really like an alternative. Because it might be that you actually look at your midfield and you go, do you know what, I quite like them, but that Tajani Reijnders looked absolutely fantastic. And I love saying his full name because what a name. So let's say you like an alternative more. The first question, did you want the new player before Game Week 1? This is a question you need to be honest with yourself about because lots of people weren't looking at Reijnders. Lots of people weren't looking at Semenyo, the man on the thumbnail. If you weren't even really considering the player prior to Game Week 1, surely one game hasn't done enough for you to now suddenly have to have them in your team for Game Week 2. You might start looking at them, that's fine. But do you want to go and bring them in straight away off the back of one game? Because again, how representative is Game Week 1? So I think if they weren't pretty close to getting in your team in Game Week 1, I would just rule it out immediately. Let's say they were, and let's say you've been going back and forth on Anderson versus Reijnders, all in the lead up to Game Week 1. The next question is, does that new player that you want to bring in have good expected minutes? And yes, I'm looking at someone like Reijnders here. I wouldn't really want to take a risk on a player that I wasn't pretty confident in their minutes. Now, this is personal, this is subjective, this is your own projection of their minutes, but I wouldn't want to bring in a rotation risk that could then cause another issue in Game Week 3, for example. So, are the minutes good? If the minutes are good, if you consider them prior to Game Week 1, the final question I'd ask is, again, are you sure that what you saw from Game Week 1 that has turned your head is representative? Is that what you expect to see moving forward? So, let's say you really liked Semenyo prior to Game Week 1. Semenyo's got fantastic minutes. And let's say you think you've just got this gut feeling that it is Semenyo's season, that he's going to have an absolutely outstanding season, and he well could. I think he's a fantastic player. If you answer yes to all of those, then again, it is absolutely a move I'd consider because you've gone through the framework that I'm using at least, and I think you've ticked every box there. He's a genuine player. But if you weren't looking, I was not looking at Semenyo in Game Week 1. There was no chance Semenyo got close to my Game Week 1 team, so there's no chance I bring him in Game Week 2 just off the back of one very good performance. Right, I'll leave it there because that's 8 minutes or so on me not really answering the questions that you have ahead of Game Week 2, but it's kind of going along with the old saying, teach a man to fish, you feed him for life, versus give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. I think I've butchered the saying there, but you get what I mean. I'm trying to explain how I make decisions, and again, I'm not a perfect manager. I'm not winning FPL anytime soon, I'm sure. But if you want to know the way my brain works, it's along these lines. And this will adapt throughout the season. This is just kind of for early season transfers. Let me know if this has been helpful. If it hasn't, I won't do this again. Let's now answer your more specific Game Week 2 questions about transferring this player out for this player. So let's apply some of that framework then to some of the main decisions that you have for this week. So all I did was put out a post over on X, and feel free to follow me over on X. Just type in at FPL__Raptor, very close to 200,000 followers. So it'd be nice to see some more of you over there. I just asked, what are the main transfers that you're considering for Game Week 2 that you would like my opinion on? And these were the ones that popped up on more than one occasion. I've tried to keep this fairly simple and basically gone for like a traffic light system. So green means I would very happily consider the transfer and I probably wouldn't say much negative to put you off it. Again, I'll explain sort of the reasoning behind that. Yellow means maybe I'm a little less keen on it, but again, I'm probably not going to do too much to try and put you off it if you feel like it's a move which works for your team. Orange means I wouldn't do it, I wouldn't recommend it, I wouldn't consider it, but I can kind of understand the reasoning behind it. And then red just simply means I would as much as I can on this channel, actively recommend that you probably don't do it. But again, if you want to do it, by all means go for it. Early on in the season is very difficult because we don't have a lot of information and we don't have a lot of data. The more the season goes on, the better my advice will be. That's why content creators and managers that have been playing for a while get better and better as the season goes on, because you get more and more info. At the start of the season, you're just as better off probably trusting your gut feeling and just going with what feels right to you. So, Bowen and Fulkrug. Let's start with the two West Ham boys. Very underwhelming against Sunderland. I mean, Sunderland beating them 3-0 on the opening day. Massive congrats if you're a Sunderland fan. That's a poor result for West Ham. I don't think it was a 3-0 game personally, but I can't sit here really and say that West Ham deserved a result from that game. That was also their best game. Like, if you look at West Ham's fixtures coming up now, we really own them. I mean, I own Fulkrug right now. We owned them really for the Sunderland game, and it was absolutely disastrous. So I can fully get behind the justification of wanting to sell your West Ham attackers. I can get behind a little bit more wanting to sell Fulkrug, because Bowen is a proven entity in the Premier League, like multiple seasons now, and the man just returns. And if West Ham get a return, Jarrod Bowen's usually involved in over 40% of West Ham's goals. So if West Ham score a couple of goals in a game, Bowen gets a goal or an assist in that game usually. The concern I would have is how many goals are West Ham going to score over this period? So as much as I think Bowen is a great asset, I don't think there's a need to rush him out, hence the orange colour next to this transfer. I do probably think that over the next 4 or 5 weeks, Wood and Mateta have a very, very good chance of outscoring Jarrod Bowen. I just don't know that you need to go and do that this week. I think Crystal Palace and Nottingham Forest are both excellent defences. Like, I've got Chris Richards and Nico Williams in my team. I'm very happy to play the pair of them because I could see this being a low-scoring affair. So I don't necessarily think that this is the week right now. As much as Bowen's fixture isn't great, I don't think I'd rush out there right now to get the likes of Wood or Mateta. And again, how much do we know on game week 1? Might that have been the anomaly? We could genuinely see a performance where West Ham do really well against Chelsea. You just don't know. And it's at home. So I feel like I would want to give Bowen one more game, and I don't think this is the week to rush out and get Forest or Crystal Palace players. I think Forest players from game week 5 onwards look fantastic, and I think Crystal Palace players from game week 4 onwards. So if I was moving to Wood or Mateta, I would move a little bit later. On Fulkrug, he was never going to be a great asset, I don't think. No one ever expected him to go out and score a hat-trick in game week 1. And he's got a little bit less, like he's not a proven asset in the Premier League. So I can understand more so wanting to move Fulkrug on. The issue is, who are you moving to? The two questions that I was getting from people on X were Thiago and Mayenda as the two players that they were looking at moving Fulkrug on to. Thiago did take the penalty in game week 1. If he doesn't get any competition signed in the transfer window, if Brentford just stick with Thiago, he could be a really decent asset. But I would be looking at game week 3 against Sunderland. Is moving Fulkrug to Thiago this week a massive upgrade? No. In game week 3, yes, it is a notable upgrade. So that would probably be the week that I'd be looking to do that. And with Mayenda, Isidore came on and looked really good. Mark Guiu is sat there ready to go and waiting. I just don't know how good Mayenda's minutes will be. So yeah, I think for that reason, I've got Fulkrug as a yellow, but it's just like, who are the alternatives? If you said Fulkrug to Strand Larsen, I'd give that a green. If I could get Fulkrug to Strand Larsen this week, I would probably do it. But most people don't have the money in the bank. We've then got two 8.5 million assets that people are asking questions on, which is Florian Wirtz and Omar Marmoush. These are very different assets to sell for me. Florian Wirtz is just an absolute no for me, no sell. And again, I said in the first section, I pride my content on not telling you what to do. This is about as close as I will get to telling you not what to do, and I would not be selling Florian Wirtz. What has changed? In fact, I actually watched that Liverpool performance, and I was really happy to own Florian Wirtz. He was taking pretty much all set pieces, even with McAllister on the pitch. He was literally just stood in that perfect number 10 position, waiting for sort of the ball to come into him and to feed into the attacker and Ekitike. There was some really nice link-up play with Gakpo. His end product left a lot to be desired, and I know you got the feeling, I think, at points watching that he could be the assister of the assister, but you knew that this was the position he was playing. Nothing really changed there. We knew he'd be on set pieces. We knew he was playing in a great attack. They go and score 4 goals. I don't think anything to me in game week 1 suggested that Florian Wirtz was no longer a good option. So I don't think Wirtz to Semenyo or Reijnders, even to free up money, makes sense for me. Marmoush is a different story, though, because Marmoush didn't start. And in fact, not only did Marmoush not start, when Marmoush came on, I don't think he was particularly good. I think Cherky was great. Marmoush struggled to get into the game. And also the system that they played in game week 1, if they continue with that system, it's just not a system which suits having Marmoush in the team unless he plays instead of Haaland, which he's not going to. There is a world in which Marmoush is just benched again in game week 2. I just don't know how many games he's going to bench a player as quality as Marmoush is my thing. So, like, I think there's a chance he starts, but I don't know that. And when you've got an 8.5 million asset that you just don't know if he's going to start or not, I think as a result, I can absolutely justify and accept if you want to do Marmoush to a Semenyo or a Reijnders. Who you move to will depend on who you prefer as an asset and how much money you need. You could even move him to someone like a Morgan Rogers. Like, I really like Morgan Rogers moving forward. I think he could do really well against Brentford. So yeah, I wouldn't sell Wirtz. I'd be happy enough to sell Marmoush. I also think you could just risk it and give Marmoush one more week. Two transfers which I've given an orange are Njai to Reijnders and João Pedro to Evanilson. Everton were terrible against Leeds. Like, that was a really poor performance. But again, I just don't know if that was just Ellen Road, difficult place to go, Monday night football. Was it just a shaky, nervous performance from Everton? But will they grow into the season now? They've still got a decent enough fixture run. And Njai is on penalties as well. And he got 90 minutes. So, again, I just don't know that I've seen quite enough to write him off as an asset. But if you did watch that game, you were probably super frustrated. So I can kind of get it, but I wouldn't be doing it. And then João Pedro to Evanilson. Again, I don't know what's changed from Game Week 1 on João Pedro. We knew that João Pedro's minutes were not particularly good, right? Delap was always going to come on between the 70th and the 75th minute for João Pedro. So that wasn't new. And we know that João Pedro can be a pretty frustrating own. He was very inconsistent at Brighton. So again, I don't think that that's particularly new. And Crystal Palace are such a great defence. They're so underrated. That was a brilliant, but we're going to discuss Cole Palmer in a bit. That was just a brilliant performance, I think, from Crystal Palace. I don't necessarily think it was Chelsea being terrible as much as it was Palace being pretty good. So, do I think João Pedro is an amazing asset? No, hence why I didn't even pick him in my Game Week 1 team. But do I still think he's very good for 7.5? Yes. The reason I've not given it a red is I think Evanilson is absolutely brilliant in FPL. Like, I really, really rate Evanilson. If there's two players that I'm looking at the moment in my team, it's like that I would love to have it. It's Mateta and Evanilson in the forward line. They're two of my favourite players to own in FPL. And yeah, I just think Evanilson is absolutely fantastic. So that's the reason I've given it orange. It's like, I quite like it, free up a bit of money, but my head is telling me you shouldn't really be selling João Pedro. So yeah, there we go. Hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully the first section and this section, and by the way, you would have seen in this section, I don't always apply the same logic that I said in the framework. Like, sometimes I just use a bit of my gut, but hopefully those two sections together will allow you to come to the correct decision for your team as about whether to make a transfer or not. So I think the most disappointing player in Game Week 1 was definitely Cole Palmer for me. I mean, a lot of players blanked. Watkins struggled to get into that game. Bruno Fernandes was playing deep. I get it. I get all of that. Florian Wirtz, we wanted more, but Cole Palmer felt the most disappointing for me. Let me know down below in the comments if you agree with that. Just simply because he's obviously very expensive, firstly, right? He's the second most expensive midfielder. In my team, he's the second most expensive player. And also, you just know what he can do, which makes it more frustrating. I think with Florian Wirtz, it's like, he's new to the Premier League. Let's cut him a little bit of slack. But it's like, Palmer, we know what you can do. Just deliver for us, please. And the reason I think Cole Palmer is on such thin ice is because he was really poor towards the back end of the last season. And when a player has really poor form at the back end of a previous season, and then looks like they're carrying that into the start of the season, I do think you can afford to be a little less patient than you normally would be. If Palmer had an exceptional end to last season, I don't even think we'd be having this discussion. I think it would just be like, yeah, one game, Crystal Palace are really good. Let's just wait until the better fixture against West Ham, and even Fulham, Brentford, United, Brighton. I'd say Palace was probably the most difficult fixture in their opening six. So yeah, let's cut him a little bit of slack. But like I said, given how poor he was, I can get it. Now, the Club World Cup throws a spanner in the works because he looked very good there and showed against the best team in Europe at the time, PSG, just what he can do. Like, he can take a game, like Reijnders did against Wolves, take a game by the scruff of the neck and just dominate and dictate the game himself single-handedly. I've been saying now for 2 seasons, over a season now, Cole Palmer is one of the only players in the Premier League that can go and get 5 attacking returns in one game. Not many players can go out there and get a 25-pointer in FPL like Cole Palmer can. And he can do that in a single half. We've seen him go and score a few goals in a single half. So the ceiling with Palmer is extremely high. The fixtures are there. He's on penalties. He's playing in an attack that you would expect to score goals. Everything lines up for Palmer to be a great asset. It just isn't working for him in this Chelsea team right now. And a lot of people are just putting it down to the position in the pitch. I would hope that it's not that simple, because if it is, what on earth is Maresca doing? Because everyone that watches Chelsea just says, Palmer's better off the right. Every time you put Palmer on that right wing, he looks more dangerous, right? It just looks more natural to him. You feel like, because he's not in the centre of the pitch where it's crowded. Like against Crystal Palace, they crowded out the centre of the pitch. Palmer and João Pedro couldn't get on the ball. The players that got on the ball more were Neto, Gittins, and then eventually Estevao, right? They were the ones that could get on the ball. So you're not almost the main man as much, and you can drift into pockets. I think that's why Palmer likes it. But what I will say is we've also seen some very good performances from Cole Palmer in the number 10. I remember against Wolves last season, at the start of the season, when he got the 3 assists and 1 goal, that was playing as the number 10. I believe against Brighton, when he got that big score, was also in the number 10. So we've seen it from him that he can perform in the centre of the pitch, but it just doesn't quite feel like it's clicking right now. And that's not a stats thing. That's just if you watch the game, he's not getting on the ball as much as you would expect. Like Palmer's a player that you expect to have like 150 touches in a game where all he's doing is just getting on the ball and spraying passes and taking shots. And against Crystal Palace, he struggled. Now, again, I want to give Palace tons of credit because we saw in the Community Shield, actually, they prevented Liverpool from having many chances. Liverpool only had 3 shots, I think, in the first half of that game. That's a brilliant Liverpool side that just didn't really manage to create much. And I think they've done very similar once again then to Chelsea. So credit to Palace, but then looking at what Palmer's done across the last 6 to 8 months, it's not just Palace. So is Palmer on thin ice with me? Absolutely. Like I would normally be sat here saying, I'm keeping Palmer for the next 6 weeks. I'm that sort of manager. I am a bit more patient. And I think you have to be if you want to sort of get better and better at FPL. You need to be a little bit patient. I'm not going to be that patient with Cole Palmer. If Cole Palmer in game weeks 2 and game weeks 3, which is probably what I'm looking at giving him, a couple of weeks, maybe a few weeks, if after sort of game weeks 2, game week 3, he's still not doing it for me, he's only got maybe 1 attacking return, still not getting on the ball enough, the data looks poor, he's not passing the eye test, I would say that going into game week 4, he has a very good chance of leaving my team. The concern I have is that in game week 1, Brentford were abysmal, and he plays Brentford in game week 4. So it's like, if I keep him to 4, I'm going to then have that discussion of, ooh, in game week 4, I'd quite like to have him. But Man United looked very good in game week 1. Brighton, I think, will have a great season. Then he faces Liverpool. So fixtures-wise, game week 5 looks like the week to offload Palmer. But again, I just don't know how long he can keep a 10.5 asset that is playing the way that he has across the last 8 months. So let me know where you stand on Palmer. I've not really answered the question of how patient should we be. I don't see a world in which you sell Cole Palmer before West Ham away. I just think it's a great fixture. He's arguably top 3 captains in FPL in Game Week 2, despite what we've seen from him recently. But I think from Game Week 3 onwards, Fulham, Brentford, United, Brighton, Liverpool, they aren't a set of fixtures that you feel like you have to have him. He's not the perfect captaincy option in any of those weeks. And yes, I will be significantly less patient with Cole Palmer than I would have been if it had had a better end to last season. So I don't normally do an entire section on just, would you start one single player? Like I'd normally discuss benching decisions in general, but so many people were asking me about Pedro Porro and whether I would start him in game week 2. And even if you don't own Pedro Porro, it's probably a section that's worth watching because I'm going to talk about projected goals and clean sheet chances for all of the teams. And whether it's worth starting a really good FPL asset in an absolutely terrible fixture, and whether this is actually a terrible fixture for Spurs. We'll discuss all of that. So on your screen, you can see a graphic from Rob T FPL, and it's basically got the projected goals and the clean sheet percentages for each of the teams for game week 2. I would recommend, if you're not watching this and you're listening to it, head over to Rob T FPL on X or on Blue Sky. I think he's active over there as well, and check out the graphics that he makes. They're absolutely brilliant. Pedro Porro is a really difficult one because I do still stand from what I said prior to Game Week 1. He's in my own team. I think Pedro Porro is one of the best defenders in FPL, and I think he will be this season. I think he's going to have a really good season for Thomas Frank. But the fixture is terrible, right? Man City away, especially based on what we saw in Game Week 1, Man City from an attacking perspective look really, really strong. And Thomas Frank has never been a particularly defensive manager. That being said, we kind of saw against PSG what Thomas Frank can do, and he's done it very well against big teams in the past for Brentford, which is start with essentially a 3 or 5 at the back. We've seen it, do you remember, because Brian Mbeumo kept playing as like the dual striker, so he essentially plays a 5-3-2 or a 3-5-2. So Pedro Porro will be playing as a wing-back. I think that does 2 things. Firstly, it unleashes Pedro Porro a bit more, because he's not got someone like Kudus in front of him on the right wing. He is the right winger, and he's the right back. So I think he would get forward a lot more. He actually got an assist against PSG in that very position. But I also think it does make Spurs a little bit more solid defensively. So I can understand the justification that, yes, against Burnley, Spurs looked anything other than solid defensively. I know they kept a clean sheet, but they conceded almost 1 XG. They didn't look great. But Thomas Frank won't set up in the same way against Burnley that he will against Man City. With all of that being said, What you can see on your screen, like I say, is the graphic from Rob. And market odds, courtesy of SpreadX here, betting companies, they take this stuff into account. They take that into account and much more. They will know that Thomas Frank played that formation against PSG. They will understand that he will play in a very different way. And even with all of that, Spurs are projected to get the third lowest goals out of all 20 teams in Game Week 2, and they have the second lowest chance of a clean sheet. So Spurs are projected to get 1.08 goals and have a 10% chance of keeping a clean sheet. So I think if you're following models, algorithms, market odds, it does not look good to start Pedro Porro. Like, they're not going to score many goals. They're projected to get one. And Porro could get that one, but unlikely. And they've got a there's 90% chance that they concede. Now, will Porro get DEFCON in this game? We saw in pre-season against Bayern Munich and Arsenal, Porro got DEFCON in both of the games where they were playing against trickier opposition. So, I can kind of understand it. I can get behind why people are asking this question. More chance of DEFCON, they could play 5 at the back, might be more attacking, and you might see a masterclass from Thomas Frank. And last season, actually, when Spurs beat City 4-0, Pedro Porro got a 14 or a 15-pointer. He actually scored in that game. So it is not beyond the realm of possibility, by the way, that Porro absolutely smashes it. But I'm looking at this now and saying, can I justify starting a player that looks that bad on paper? When you then compare it to something like Burnley, and I know this sounds crazy, but I myself in my own team am deciding, do I start Pedro Porro or Esteve? Which again sounds like a crazy decision. But Burnley are projected to get 1.28 goals, which puts them about, I think, 12th in terms of how likely they are to score goals. And then clean sheet percentage, they are the 4th most likely to keep a clean sheet in Game Week 2 with a 32% chance of a clean sheet. So on paper, I think Esteve is the right one to start between Esteve and Porro. And if you're making decisions between Porro and another player, if you look at this, most of them on paper probably make a little bit more sense to start. Now, again, it might be that you are so confident that he gets DEFCON and you think Thomas Frank will put in a good performance that actually you've got a good feeling about Porro. That's okay. I'm going to struggle to go through with starting him though, because in my heart, I think City score at least a couple. I can't see a clean sheet. And so I am relying then on DEFCON and attacking returns. Whereas with Esteve, by the way, if he gets a clean sheet, could also get DEFCON. There is a world in which Sunderland dominate the game. Burnley have to sit back and defend, because we saw that in the Championship. Even in the Championship, they were still defence first. Esteve could still get DEFCON and a clean sheet. I don't expect an attacking return, I would just say that. So, yeah, again, I feel like this is a section where I've not really answered the question. Just to say, I kind of do understand the angle that people are taking by saying we should be starting Porro. But then when you look at it like this, I think there is absolutely no issue if you want to bench Porro this week. And at the moment, I'm probably just about leaning that way. So lots of people are playing chips in the early part of the season, and it makes sense, right? We have 2 of every chip this year. I do not mind playing the chips early and aggressive. Lots of people looking at wildcards this week. Maybe in the deadline decisions video on Friday, I'll show you a wildcard draft and what I would go with. There were also some questions around bench boost and free hit, so I just wanted to address those because a couple of people were asking the same sort of question. So the first question that came in was around the free hit. This person said, my team is in very bad shape. I don't want to wildcard early and I don't want to take hits. So let's say wildcard is out of the question, hits are out of the question, but the team looks pretty poor. And I think not doing anything will make me fall far behind if players I don't have perform well in Game Week 2. So there's this concern that it's a poor Game Week 1, the team still doesn't look good for Game Week 2, and you could just continue to fall further and further behind. Maybe your mini league leaders are already 30 points ahead. So the question is, I'm thinking of using a free hit to evaluate Game Week 2 and play catch up at the same time. What do you think about free hit in 2? So essentially you're using the free hit to give you an extra week of info to have hopefully a strong Game Week 2, and then you can work out what to do from Game Week 3. Again, this is one of those where I sort of understand the angle, but probably disagree with the final conclusion that you've come to here. My concern with this is if your team is in very bad shape, you're going to get that same team back in Game Week 3 if you free hit, right? Free hit is you're changing the team for 1 week. So come Game Week 3, you're probably going to have to wildcard unless you were wrong and your team isn't in bad shape. If you were wrong and your team isn't in bad shape and you're just overreacting to 1 week, which is possible, I've not seen your team, then there's a good chance it doesn't look as bad as you think for Game Week 2. My concern as well on top of that is if you think that you don't quite have enough information right now to wildcard, you don't want to wildcard early, what makes you think you have enough information to play a successful free hit? You've got the fixtures in front of you, of course, but how do you know which players to select for that free hit when, again, we don't have enough information? I don't think a free hit or a wildcard's bad in 2, by the way. I'm just sort of following your line of logic here, and I'm just thinking, it doesn't really help you too much, I think. Here, you come back to the same team in 3, you're still going to have the same issue of not knowing exactly which players to pick. I think if you are sat there, because again, I can't see your team, but let's say you are sat there and you've genuinely picked a bad team, like some people do, and I've done it before. You just pick your team and you know, even with limited information from Game Week 1, you've just had a stinker. I think you've got 2 options. You suck it up for Game Week 2 and just almost double check and confirm that your team does indeed suck, and then wildcard in 3. Or just get it over and done with and wildcard now. Because as much as we don't have information, you can build a good wildcard. Chuck an even Ilson or Strand Last in there. I like that. Maybe chuck a Truth Error in there. He looked good in Game Week 1. You immediately might say, do you know what? I've changed my mind. I want a Haaland and Salah draft. Like, I've seen enough of those 2 in Game Week 1. That's what I want. The 5/5s look really good value. Chuck an Anderson or a Reijnders in there. I'm not saying, by the way, that you won't then encounter issues because, again, 1 game week isn't quite enough, but we've certainly learnt some stuff from Game Week 1. So I think in your position, if you're sat there and your team looks very bad, I wouldn't free hit because I think you're going to come back to the same team. I would just wildcard in that situation. I wouldn't be taking hits. I would just get the wildcard done. The next question then was around bench boost. Lots of people have a very similar bench boost where you've got Dubravka, Estev, Guiu, and then 1 defender, probably with either a tough fixture or they're not the best defender. So the bench that I was sent had Dubravka, Estev, Pedro Porro, and Mark Guiu. And the question is, like, would you consider a bench boost where you've got double Burnley defense potentially and also Guiu? So you've essentially got 2 defenders playing against the forward, but also the forward just isn't going to start. The short answer to this is I'm not considering it, no. When I look at what you can achieve with this, you need a Burnley clean sheet, right? So the first thing is you are reliant on something that has a 32% chance of happening, which is Burnley keeping a clean sheet. If that doesn't happen, maybe Dubravka makes a couple of saves, maybe Estev gets DEFCON, maybe you get lucky and you get 7 points from the 2 of them. But more realistically, you're probably getting 4 or lower from the 2 of them there. You've then got to, if that doesn't come through, you've got to get super lucky with the other defender. And with Pedro Porro, like I said, low chance of attacking return, low chance probably of a clean sheet. And then you might get DEFCON again if you're lucky. But the 3 of those there, not great. And then, like I said, Guiu's not even playing, right? Guiu will not start. Guiu might not even get minutes. In Game Week 1, Mayenda starts the scores, Isidore comes on the scores, Guiu plays 0 minutes. So you are looking at a world here where if Burnley lose their clean sheet, Guiu again doesn't get many or any minutes. And your other defender, unless they're brilliant and you get lucky, it reeks to me of 3 blanks and 1 player getting 0 minutes. I just can't imagine that there won't be a slightly better opportunity in the future. On the flip side, let me approach this from an optimistic way. Let's say Dubravka gets a save point, right? Makes his 3 saves. He gets 3 points. Let's say, yeah, Estev concedes, but he gets the DEFCON. Let's say Estev gets 4. Like I say, you can get 7 from the pair of them. Let's then say that Pedro Porro gets the appearances, but no attacking return, no DEFCON. Let's say he just gets the 2. That's already 9 points. Let's say Guiu just comes off the bench. That's a 10-point bench boost. And I don't think that's a hugely optimistic outcome. That's probably like middling of what you... It could be a lot worse than that, but it could also be a lot better. You'd kind of probably take a 10-point bench boost, I suppose. And on the flip side, if you do get the double Burnley clean sheet and your other defender gets something, DEFCON attacking returns clean sheet, there is a world in which this is a 14, 15-point bench boost, maybe even more than that, 18 points. So do I think it's silly to consider the bench boost if it looks something similar to this? No. Am I considering it? No. I can't really justify it. When my forward plays against my 2 defenders on the bench, I don't expect the forward to play, and I'm a little bit wary in this case of whether my double Burnley defence will actually come through. So yeah, whilst my bench probably won't look exactly like this, if it was something along these lines, I wouldn't consider it. Let me know if you're thinking about playing the bench boost in Game Week 2. So guys, there we have it. I think a slightly different video today. I've gone through in a little bit more detail about like how I make decisions. And I think early on in the season, it is worth me trying to really justify why I've made a decision or why I think a certain thing so that you can either learn from my mistakes or join me and make decisions in a slightly similar way to how I do. But if you did enjoy today's video, please do drop a like. I really do appreciate it. It's super quick to do, completely free. It helps me massively. Also, if you're not yet subscribed and you've got to this point, you've got to at least consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. If you've liked and subscribed, drop a comment. If you've done all 3 of those, do consider hitting the notification bell. Not many people do it, but if you turn on notifications, you'll be notified when one of my videos go live. Thank you so much for all the support. I really appreciate it. Until next time, bye-bye.